Welcome back, everyone. We're kicking off today's deep dive, and it's a big one. We're talking about Miriam Makeba.
Miriam Makeba, Mama Africa.
Exactly, Mama Africa. A truly incredible figure, and if you want to learn more about her impact, well, you've come to the right place. We've assembled a pretty amazing collection of sources to help us get well-informed and quickly.
Oh, yeah.
We're looking at her official website, of course.
Makes sense.
Got to start there.
Of course.
We've got her Wikipedia entry, a historical piece from South African History Online, a more recent article from the Mail and Guardian, and we even found a feature from Al Jazeera.
Wow, so we've got a really diverse set of perspectives here. That's going to be interesting to explore.
It is, and it's an incredible journey we're about to embark on. From those early days singing in church to performing on the world stage, Makeba's life was full of amazing talent, resilience, and powerful activism against apartheid. Of course, it wasn't always an easy path.
No, not at all.
To really understand her impact, I think we need to start back in 1932 when she was born in Johannesburg.
Yeah, those early years were definitely marked by hardship. Her mother was in prison just 18 days after she was born.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize it was that soon after.
Yeah, just 18 days, can you imagine? And then, of course, the struggles that came with growing up during the Depression, it wasn't an easy time for anyone.
No, absolutely not. And to make matters worse, her father passed away when she was still quite young. But even with all that going on, her musical talent was just impossible to ignore.
It really did shine through. The sources mention her singing in the church choir and even performing solo for a royal visit when she was young. Apparently, she even joined her cousin's band, the Cuban Brothers, pretty early on. That seems like the real beginning of her professional career.
Wow, I hadn't realized she started so young. And this was during the 1950s in Sophiatown, which was this vibrant multicultural hub in Johannesburg.
Yeah, Sophiatown. They often called it the Harlem of South Africa because of its incredible arts and music scene.
Right, right. Sadly, it was demolished under apartheid laws, but for a while it was the place to be. And during this time, she was singing with groups like the Manhattan Brothers and later the all-female Skylarks, which really helped her gain recognition for those powerhouse vocals.
Oh, yeah, she had an incredible voice.
Yeah, and this is where things start to get really interesting. In 1959, she landed a role in the anti-apartheid film Come Back Africa.
Oh, Come Back, Africa. Talk about a breakthrough moment.
I know.
That film really launched her onto the international stage. Suddenly, she was performing in Venice, in London, catching the attention of people worldwide.
And it was in London that she had that fateful meeting with Harry Belafonte.
Harry Belafonte, yeah.
Became a major mentor for her. He helped her with recordings, immigration to the U.S., and really championed her career.
He saw something special in her, that's for sure, and his support was really pivotal in her rise to fame. Imagine moving to the U.S. and just a few years later, you're performing on The Steve Allen Show, singing at the Village Vanguard, one of the most famous jazz clubs in the world, and getting rave reviews from the New York Times.
The American dream.
She was living it. But then in 1960, everything changed.
1960. Pivotal year.
It was the year of the Sharpeville massacre in South Africa.
A turning point in the fight against apartheid.
Absolutely. Peaceful protesters were gunned down by police. It shocked the world, really, and drew a lot of international attention to the brutality of the South African regime. It was a horrific event.
It was, and it was during this time that Makeba received the news that her mother had passed away.
Oh, how awful.
It was a terrible time for her.
And, because of her growing international profile and, of course, her criticism of apartheid, the South African government denied her re-entry into the country. She couldn't even attend her own mother's funeral.
They revoked her passport and citizenship, forcing her into exile for over 3 decades.
It's heartbreaking, but it was also a turning point for her activism. Her music had always reflected her life experiences, but now she was even more determined to use her voice to speak out against the injustices of apartheid.
Right. It's almost like her personal story and the political situation became inseparable.
Completely intertwined.
And speaking of powerful music, we can't forget Pata Pata, her global hit. Isn't it ironic that this song, so full of joy and rhythm, was banned in her own country?
The irony is incredible. Pata Pata became an international sensation, which only helped amplify her message even more on a global scale. And that's one of the things that makes her story so fascinating, this blend of the personal and the political. She always maintained that her music wasn't political, just a reflection of her life. But, for a world waking up to the horrors of apartheid, those experiences resonated deeply.
She wasn't just singing songs. She was sharing her truth.
Exactly.
And her talent and message resonated with all sorts of audiences. I mean, think about it. The sources mention her performing everywhere. Trade union halls, jazz festivals.
Even for the Pope.
For the Pope.
It's amazing. That's what's so remarkable about Makeba. Her music transcended geographical and cultural boundaries. She brought the sounds of Africa to a global audience, and in doing so, challenged so many preconceived notions of what African music could be.
She wasn't just performing. She was educating and changing perceptions.
Mhm.
But as with many artists who take a strong stance, her journey wasn't without controversy. There was quite a bit of debate, even among those who supported her, surrounding her participation in Paul Simon's Graceland tour in 1987.
Yeah, Graceland. A really complex issue. This really brings up the complexities of cultural boycotts, doesn't it?
Good.
I mean, Makeba herself supported the cultural boycott of South Africa, but by participating in Graceland, she sparked some important discussions about the nuances of those actions and the impact on artists.
It's like a real-life ethical puzzle. Even with the best of intentions, navigating those situations can be incredibly difficult.
It really can. Makeba's story really reminds us of that. And, her personal life also played a pretty significant role in her story. The sources mention her marriages quite frequently.
Especially her marriage to Stokely Carmichael, a prominent leader in the Black Power movement. That relationship seemed to put her in the crosshairs.
It's mentioned in almost all the sources we're looking at that marriage and their shared activism led to a lot of backlash and scrutiny, especially in the U.S. They faced cancellations, harassment,
Wow.
and eventually they were forced into exile from the U.S.
It makes you think about the sacrifices people make for their beliefs and the ripple effects those choices can have. And tragically, on top of the political turmoil, Makeba also experienced the loss of her daughter, Bongi.
Oh, yeah. The sources, especially the Al Jazeera piece, are very open about the pain she endured losing her daughter. It's a reminder that even amidst global fame and activism, personal grief remains a deeply human experience. She was Mama Africa, but she was also a mother who had experienced great loss.
It adds another layer to her story. It's not just the music or the activism. It's the human being who lived through it all. But even in the face of that loss, Makeba's spirit never seemed to waver.
She was incredibly resilient. And eventually, in 1990, she was able to return to South Africa after 31 years in exile.
Can you imagine the emotions of that homecoming?
Must have been incredible. The Al Jazeera article has a particularly powerful story about Makeba visiting her mother's grave after all that time. She apologized for not being there when her mother passed away.
That's a powerful image.
It is.
And after her return, she didn't slow down at all. She became a goodwill ambassador for South Africa to the UN, advocated for humanitarian causes, and even founded the Makeba Center for Girls to support orphans. Her commitment to making a difference continued until the very end. It really did.
And she kept performing, right? Even with osteoarthritis.
Oh, yeah, she did. And her death in 2008 actually happened while she was performing at a concert in Italy. It's tragic, but it also feels strangely fitting.
Yeah.
Music was such a driving force in her life until her final breath. It really is a testament to her passion, that's for sure. It makes you wonder what she would think of the world today. With all the ongoing struggles for social justice and equality, her story feels more relevant than ever.
It does, doesn't it? And speaking of her story, we've talked about the political side of things, but I want to circle back to her music for a bit. What was it about her sound that captivated people all over the world?
Well, she had this incredible blend of influences, jazz, traditional African melodies, Western pop, even some Latin American rhythms. It was something totally fresh and different from what most people were listening to at the time.
I remember hearing the click song, or Conquathwain, for the first time. And those clicks and rhythms were so unique, so captivating, I'd never heard anything like it. Exactly. Those clicks are actually part of the Xhosa language. And for many listeners, they were like a sonic gateway, introducing them to the beauty and complexity of African languages and musical traditions.
It wasn't just the sound, though, was it? I mean, her stage presence, that energy, that passion, it was infectious.
Absolutely. The sources describe her as having this incredibly dynamic vocal range, a really captivating stage presence. She could be powerful and vulnerable, joyful and mournful, all within the same performance.
And she totally owned her look, too. That natural hair, the vibrant traditional African clothing. She was making a statement.
Oh, yeah. You're right. She embraced her African identity in every aspect of her performance. And in doing so, she challenged Western beauty standards, those narrow ideas of what a female performer should look and sound like. It was a powerful message, especially for that time period.
Revolutionary, really. And that message connected with people from all walks of life. It didn't matter what your race, nationality, or political beliefs were. You couldn't help but be drawn in by her music and her story.
Yeah. It's like her music transcended those divisions, creating this space where everyone could connect on a human level. And that's a huge part of her enduring legacy. She showed the world that music can be a unifying force, even amidst conflict and division.
Speaking of conflict, though,
Hmm.
I'm still a little curious about the Graceland controversy. We touched on it earlier, but I think it deserves a little more unpacking. Makeba was so outspoken against apartheid. So why participate in a project that some saw as breaking the cultural boycott of South Africa?
It's a really complex issue, and the sources offer different perspectives. On the one hand, you have those who argue that her involvement actually helped bring more attention to the injustices of apartheid, that it fostered cultural exchange.
Right.
But on the other hand, there were those who criticized it, saying it undermined the boycott and possibly even legitimized the South African government.
A real ethical dilemma with no easy answers.
Exactly. And it reminds us that even with the best of intentions, navigating these kinds of situations can be incredibly challenging, especially when you're dealing with something as multifaceted as a cultural boycott. There are so many different viewpoints and potential consequences to consider.
It makes you think about the responsibility that artists have when they decide to use their platform for activism.
Oh, for sure. It's definitely a balancing act. And Makeba's experience with Graceland shows us that even the most well-intentioned actions can be met with criticism and debate.
It's a good reminder that these issues aren't black and white. There are so many nuances, shades of gray, and sometimes you just have to make difficult choices based on what you believe is right, even if it means facing backlash.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the most valuable lessons we can take away from Makeba's story. It's not about always making the right choice, but about being thoughtful, intentional, and being willing to stand up for what you believe in, even when it's hard.
And she certainly did that. Thinking about her return to South Africa in 1990, after 31 years in exile, I can only imagine what an emotional experience that must have been.
Yeah. The Al Jazeera article describes it as a deeply personal homecoming, full of both joy and sorrow. She was finally able to return to the land that she loved, but she was also confronted with all the ghosts of the past.
That image of her visiting her mother's grave
Yeah.
and apologizing for not being there when she died it just breaks my heart.
It's such a powerful moment, and it really speaks to the lasting impact of exile, the complex emotions that come with finally being able to return home after so many years away.
But she didn't just dwell in the past, did she? She continued to use her voice and her influence to advocate for positive change in South Africa and globally.
She was a force of nature. Her work as a goodwill ambassador for South Africa to the UN, her advocacy for humanitarian causes, her founding of the Makeba Center for Girls, it all shows her unwavering commitment to making a difference.
It's like her whole life was a testament to the power of resilience and the belief that you can always keep fighting for a better future, no matter what you've been through.
That's a powerful message, especially for anyone facing their own challenges and setbacks. Makeba's story shows that even in the face of incredible adversity, hope and determination can prevail.
It's truly inspiring. And knowing her story, all the depth of experience and emotion that went into it, it makes you appreciate her music even more.
Right. Her music wasn't just entertainment, it was a reflection of her life, her struggles, her hopes, her dreams, and that's what makes it so timeless and universal.
It reminds us that music can be a powerful tool for change, but it's also a deeply personal and emotional form of expression.
Exactly. And I think that's something we often forget when we think about famous musicians or political figures. We see them as symbols, but we forget that they're also human beings with their own unique stories and experiences.
Makeba's story helps us remember that humanity. It encourages us to look beyond the headlines and accolades and to see the person behind the persona.
It's a call for empathy, for understanding, and for recognizing the shared humanity that connects us all, regardless of our differences.
That's such a powerful message, and one that feels so important right now. What stands out to you as her greatest legacy? It's hard to choose just one thing. Her impact is so multifaceted, but for me, it's her unwavering belief in the power of music to transcend borders and unite people. That's a message we really need in the world today.
I completely agree. And her music continues to inspire activists and artists alike. We see echoes of her struggles in the fight for social justice that's happening all over the world. Those themes of resilience, hope, and unity in her music are just as powerful now as they were decades ago.
It's amazing to think about how much she accomplished and how her voice continues to resonate. She was a woman who defied so many expectations, challenging racial and gender norms throughout her career. And that feels particularly relevant now, with so many movements focused on empowering women and marginalized communities.
You're absolutely right. I mean, think about it. Her refusal to conform to Western beauty standards, her outspoken criticism of apartheid, her marriage to Stokely Carmichael, these were all acts of defiance, especially during a time when women, particularly women of color, were often silenced or expected to be less visible.
She was a true trailblazer, paving the way for future generations of artists and activists to use their platforms to speak out against injustice. And musically, think about how she helped introduce African rhythms and melodies to a global audience, expanding the boundaries of what was considered popular music at the time.
The world music genre owes a great debt to her pioneering spirit. She showed the world that music has the power to transcend borders and cultural differences, bringing people together through shared rhythm and emotion.
It's a powerful reminder of the unifying force of music. But it also makes me think about those challenges artists face when they try to balance their art with their activism. It's not always easy to use your platform to speak out for good without risking backlash or even personal safety.
Right. That's a tension that Makeba had to navigate throughout her career. As we've seen in the sources, especially the Al Jazeera article, she faced a lot of scrutiny and criticism. Especially after marrying Carmichael, she had concerts canceled, was denied visas, and was even put under surveillance by the FBI.
It really shows the price some artists pay for their activism and how courageous she was to keep speaking out.
It absolutely does. She refused to be silenced, even when it meant facing serious personal and professional consequences.
She truly embodies the idea of speaking truth to power.
Yes, she does. And her story is a real inspiration to anyone fighting for justice and equality today. It shows that even in the face of overwhelming obstacles, one voice can make a difference. It's a message of hope and resilience that we all need to hear, now more than ever.
Well said. So for our listeners, if you're looking to go even deeper into Makeba's life, we highly recommend checking out the sources we've been discussing. Her official website, her Wikipedia entry, the South African History Online article, the piece from the Mail and Guardian, and the Al Jazeera feature. Each one gives you a different angle on her incredible journey and her impact on the world.
And as you reflect on her story, we'd like to leave you with this thought. What can you do in your own life and community to carry on Makeba's legacy of activism, resilience, and unity? What seeds of hope can you plant to help create a more just and equitable world for future generations?
Those are powerful questions worth pondering. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the extraordinary life of Miriam Makeba, Mama Africa. Until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep those conversations going.